Loving the new profile pic, Lori.
What was that, Keith?
I said I'm loving your new profile pic.
Thank you. Yeah, the Hebrew, the Yud. hmm I'm really excited to hear about what you've been doing, Keith.
Well, you got the link, right?
Yeah, I looked at it. Your site is, I really love what you've added to it.
Yeah, and I'm continuously adding it. Like tonight, I'm going over the adoptions. I want to put in Jeremiah 1:5 and some other biblical verses at the very top of my notices and my
Yeah, that
adoptions.
one. That one's important just because it really does lay out the original jurisdiction, right?
Right. Well, see,
hmm
they use all of their quote ordinances, which are contracts, as a means of sanctioning, just like they did to Cuba. That's all it is. They're sanctioning people through their ordinances. If we let them know that we are sanctified and ordained prior, or the origin of ordained, or it's a root of ordained, or providence, previous, all something that's already been done. What is done is what ought to be done. There is nothing new under the sun. We are all ordained to speak freely in his word. That's all it takes. And then just let it trickle down. And that's the one element I want to make sure I get in there real quick before I get going any further, is to place those biblical principles from where which they get those um, various different ordinances that they use to sanction people. So again, Jeremiah 1 verse 5 speaks directly to that origination of being sanctified and ordained. That's where they get all of their laws, from that first. And it starts out, before I knew thee, or before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And this is the premise of we are not subject to the laws scripted by our fellow man, because that's just their opinion. We still have to go by what's in our heart. Now, if what's in our heart matches their opinion, then we're probably in a pretty good spot. But what we've come to find out is that through our indoctrination, most people feel pretty complacent sitting on that couch, stuffing their mouths full of processed foods and poison drinks and watching the fabulous lives of other people. And then they hear the sirens. So they quick get up and peek their head out the window. And lo and behold, there's a bunch of lights and everything a couple blocks down the street, and they're hauling somebody out of the house. Well, it's not me. So they just go back to the couch, stuffing their mouths and drinking that poison and watching somebody else's life. The next night, same thing. This time it's down the other end of the street, about a block away, and the same thing. They go back in and they start stuffing themselves full of that fiction again. And then the next night, same thing. This time it's over here across the other end of the block. And then the next night, same thing, except it's the neighbor. When do you think they're going to come knocking at your door? Don't wait.
Well, I think that's the
Don't
sad
wait.
part, Keith.
Yeah, don't wait. Set that. They use these city ordinances to tell you got to put up fences and gates. Those are borders and ports. Okay, let's show you where you got that ordinance from. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. And the land shall not be sold forever, for it is mine, and ye are strangers and sojourners with me. Now, if that's true for me, it's true for you. So when you come to that gate that's attached with that fence that I've got around this piece of property, it's not up to me to say I've got a border in place and you have to go around so I can protect. It's up to me to say you are a stranger and a sojourner with me. And therefore, it's right of passage or portage through whatever, and you're supposed to be there. Remember the footprints in the sand? The way I think of it is I'm supposed to be this set of footprints in the sand so others can follow along. That's my position. And I'll be damned if I don't see any footprints behind me. And it's a hard
I,
spot because I'm
I
trying to
think
lead,
it,
but I have nothing to lead with. I don't even have a piece of land to show how this works with.
well, I think that's part of the part that's sad is like when I look back on over my life is the fact that they've removed the spirituality from people, you know. There's that statement in Jeremiah is profound to realize that most people are led to believe that they're a body that has a spirit instead of realizing we're a spirit.
Yeah, and it's really realizing that everything comes, like I said, what is done is what ought to be done. There is nothing new under the sun. He created all things. That means he created me, he created you, and what is done to me is what ought to be done. And I was ordained and sanctified, and therefore I've got to give that same to you. So that already tells me we're already supposed to be in peace naturally through the laws of equity of nature and nature's God. And that's, see, we've got to realize that we're natural first before we got any comprehension of this God thing. We were just like any other creature on earth. And then one day we woke up. See, I don't think it happened quite so much as people perceive in the Bible that one day this happened and the next day they were removed from the garden. See, one day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. It's all the same.
Right.
But we've just got to realize these borders and fences in every jurisdiction. When we think about the U.S. Code, people don't realize that's 54 different jurisdictions. They've got 54 different titles, and they've got one or two of them reserved, and they actually use like 52 of them.
Because you mentioned, you know, here we are back to this putting up posts, right?
Yeah, and see what I'm establishing here, folks, is what's known as a consular post with the postal service on the international level. I didn't go to a local postmaster.
Yeah.
I went to the internet, the World Wide Web, and that is controlling electronic export information into an automated electronic system whereby there are automated commercial environments that reach out and capture you just like a fucking pirate or a privateer. And unless you are on this side of that border, providing your plenipotentiary powers of what goes through that gate by expressing it firmly before it goes, whatever automated commercial environments out there that are allowed to capture it will do so, and they will try to use it against you. This is the importance of learning the machine language and the NIAX codes. I know you remember this, Lori. We went over the construction of those NIAX codes through the electronic formatting of your internal operating systems. We can do the same thing, and that's my intent of going from a .art to a .post domain extension. It will incorporate those on the cybersecurity level automatically.
It's interesting the narrowcast, how it's software used in their system, you know?
Right. And that's why I say, that master trust account, that's international. So that goes to the international numbering system to begin with, the very roots.
Yeah, the ISO. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I asked Lex to look at that because he's a software developer and mainframe programmer.
Yeah.
We can't do everything, so it's good to have people who are specialized. So I don't know if you've talked with him about that, but that's something.
Yeah, we briefly discussed it, but at the moment, like I said, I'm one of those guys, I want to learn each of these things along the way, so I don't really want to take advantage of missing out on this part of the education to skip and have somebody else teach me something else. I want to build up to that, and then he can teach me how to do it as I go. So it's a good idea, and I am going to take advantage of it. First, I've got to learn this, and like I said, once I get ready to move up to that .post is when I'll start learning that stuff, hopefully soon, and then get that .post domain, so that when I get that .post domain, I can clarify again from this side of the port whether I agree with those actual terms in those NIAC codes implemented. There are tweaks that I can make. Everybody can do it. It's just you've got to be able to recognize them. So let me see. I don't know if I put the link in there, did I? Okay, let me do this. Okay, there's the link in the chat section. So if everybody wants to pull that up, and we'll just start going through some of this so I can show you what I'm talking about in regards to the adoptions and everything. And hopefully this will make sense as I go along, because I know the Zooms that I've done on this before, a lot of the information has kind of been kind of a hay bale thing. Right now I'm getting it set up point by point, as we call it. And it starts out, of course, like I always mention, hiring an attorney proves one is incompetent. So ye already have counsel, ask and ye shall receive. Feel free to browse, ask questions via email, bkeithlittle@yahoo.com. And it says adoptions, alternative dispute resolutions. I tie those together because that's what we're talking about. There are going to be alternatives, and if there are disputes, we are going to resolve them. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like I said, what's done is what ought to be done. There is nothing new under the sun. So if there's a dispute, we're going to find out who's correct, who's right, who's wrong. There is no serving two masters. There is no wishy-washy. I quit signing documents 6 years ago for a reason, and I meant it. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Therefore, it is to be presumed as the intent, as opposed to any interpretation or opinion otherwise, that no ordinance or legislated rule making of any kind or species can be applied to the people for any kind of sanctions. We'll make it bold, we'll make it blue, and we'll give it a nice size as well. So there's our There's our alternative dispute resolution to any kind of dispute that anybody else wants to raise. It's already been resolved. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. So even in the law of nations, this is recognized, has to be, because they call themselves a nation. Therefore, it is to be presumed as the intent, as opposed to any interpretation or opinion otherwise, that no ordinance or legislative rulemaking of any kind or species can be applied to the people for any kind of sanctions, to establish a more perfect union with all neighbors. To all neighbors and creatures, a biblical reference that when we gospel the word of God, our Father which art in heaven, it is to all creatures, not just to other people or other man or other humankinds or other servants. He takes care of the smallest wee little creature. What makes you think he wouldn't take care of his greatest creation? Postal terms, postal products, and then I posted the, remember the terms where we found the term key, to press, numbered keys, or other identifiers. We've already identified that before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. That's the first identifier, no matter how you want to explain it. Let's go ahead and U.S. Code 1. Let's just, it's words denoting numbers, gender, and so forth. Which is to press numbered keys or other identifiers. So now we've tied that together with the postal terms right here. Products. Those products are, it says see also PS form 3623 and 3877. That's your firm mailing manual and some kind of transfer document or something. Can't remember exactly what it is. Can't remember everything, folks. But then right away, we mentioned the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literary and Artistic Works. Now, what we're talking about here, folks, is literary and artistic works. Now, this stuff I got here is all from the public domain. That's a literary work. Period. That's a basic, simplest quantum concept that we have to comprehend, that they cannot possibly deny. If you get your information from the public domain and put it in the public domain with your own post as your own consular post, you're already establishing a peace treaty with the public domain. When you post the things, you have to make sure that they are concise and uniform. Like they say, uniform throughout all the jurisdictions. And I'm showing you how to do this. 1 USC 1, that's the very first code they use. And like I said, it's just different jurisdictions, but every one of those jurisdictions have to start from the original jurisdiction, which is 1 USC 1. This is the connection to the postal terms, that one definition, key, which says to press numbered keys or other identifiers. Now, in order to press numbered keys or other identifiers on either end of the scale, it either has to come from a definitive paper form or be entered with the intent to create a definitive paper form and then sign it. And it says this in their codes. And when I find that code again, I'll put that in there with it as well. So the Berne Convention, And it talks about the treaty is established by adoption in, on, and for the public domain known as the World Wide Web, as amended hereby. This is that statement I was telling you about. As amended hereby, hereby with classification. It's now classified. How? Because I did the classification myself. I expressly phrased it as a classification, and what that classification was: private use only and not commercial. Period. Communications are to be sent to the clearing office without commercial attachments at the following email address. Now, I specifically gave my yahoo.com because that one was established 20 some years ago. And it has a longer standing. And in 5 years, it has what? Standing as an ancient document or intent to create an ancient document. Now we're talking about creating ancient documents based on an electronic record. And I'm telling you, people, the internet's been out since 1985, and we're talking about you're behind 35 years already. We need to catch up. Then it goes on to talk about that. And then, of course, it talks about the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. And this is what we're talking about, the protection. Diplomatic security is already recognized in the Treaty of Berne, and anybody who wants to adopt it. Guess what? It's been adopted as an alternative dispute resolution according to before I formed it. This supersedes their peace treaty and says that, yeah, even the peace treaty can't sanction me. I'm already ordained long before it came into existence itself. It is not able to ordain or sanctify me. They get their ordination and sanctification through us. We are the ports for all fictions. It can only be created by us. Goes on to talk about establishment of a consular post. A consular post may be established in the territory of the receiving state only with the state's consent. Guess what? I've created a consular post in the receiving state's jurisdiction in that state. The state of the World Wide Web, the internet, which is regulated by the International Postal Service with the Treaty of Berne, Vienna Conventions, the Constitution of the UPU, and a Uniform Customs Code of NAFTA. The seat of the consular post is classification, private use only and not commercial. A reiteration of what I stated up here. And consular district shall be established by the sending state and shall be subject to the approval of the receiving state. Guess what? It's been on the international web for over a year, and therefore it has international recognition by the Postal Service itself. The international plenipotentiary power of all public contracting. And I'm of the same station in life. I have plenipotentiary powers of all public contracts that come against the estate. And I have the Postal Service as the surety. And they even have a real estate investment trust called the Postal Realty Trust, Inc., as backing their side of the word. So when I get that birth certificate and I transfer that title to them, guess what? The title is back through them and their Postal Realty Trust. And that, by coincidence, operates all postal roads and routes. Routes. It doesn't say this route or that route. It says routes, and that means the international internet, the World Wide Web. That is a route. Period. Subsequent changes in the seat of the consular post. I have established the seat just by sitting here. its classification, or the consular district. I don't know what your district is. I was born in this earth. I'm not of this world. I'm born in this world. I'm of a much greater jurisdiction than this district or any district you can define. So please define your district for me. While I remind you, he made all things. May be made by sending. He made all things. How can you make it? It's got to be inferior. By sending state only with the consent of the receiving state. They've already consented. They let me post it on the international World Wide Web. So the acquiescence of not saying anything is proof of consent, right? And these are the plenipotentiary powers that we're talking about of contracts internationally. How much power does that hold in the contract world, people? The consent of receiving state shall also be required if a consulate general or a consulate desires to open a vice consulate. Shall also be required if a consulate, then it can't be required. It's babble. The prior express consent of the receiving state shall also be required for the opening of an office forming part of an existing consular post elsewhere than at the seat thereof. Done. Like I said, they have acquiesced. They've not rebutted it. I paid $35 plus tax. It came like $39 to BraveNet, who is a commercial entity, to put this up. And I did it all through the fiction. No social security number attached to it. Did it with a PayPal card, or excuse me, at the time it was a credit card that I had incorporated with a partner. He had a business, and he gave me, listed me as a manager, and allowed me to have a secondary credit card. All I had to do was give a name and address where it was to be sent to. It was using his account. Then I established a PayPal account, so it was established with another bank and not me specifically, just using name and address. It didn't need a number. It had a name and address, and nobody used a number in lieu of the name and address. Then it goes on to say Article 36, treaties providing for rights for third states. So in any contract that they are using, like I said, if I've got a gate and a fence around my property, and I am the one that possesses the land, because the land shall not be sold forever, for it is mine, and he made all things, and everything we make from the land is things that he made originally. So all this contract shit about selling this and buying this, it's all fraud. It's all fiction. And we just come out of it. A right arises for a third state from a provision of treaty if the parties to the treaty intend the provisions to accord that right either to the third state or a group of states to which it belongs, or to all states, and the third state assents thereto. Again, like I explained, I knew thee before I formed thee in the belly. Their peace treaty is subordinate to that. So it's not me ascending to them. It's them acceding to that. Okay, I agree, but I'm going to show you that I'm not acceding to your document. You are, in fact, acceding to this. No, we wrote it. Well, the biblical scripture's been around how long? It's the most prolifically published. That's where all scripture comes from, is the scripture. So unless you comprehend the context in which it's being used, then you're babbling. So what we do is we fix the context in which it's being used. And it says a state exercising a right in accord, or let me finish this. Its assent shall be presumed so long as the contrary is not indicated. So that's what we're doing. We're indicating the contrary is that you actually got your peace treaty from this. And it supersedes. So you are agreeing to us. See, we've never had any problem. The problem was mutual mistakes on information that was given prior. Now we're going to draw that back. We're going to withdraw what was errantly drawn into the record. unless the treaty otherwise provides. And it can't otherwise provide because, again, like I said, it inferiority subordinately comes from something greater. And that's what we are expressing. And it's the pure trust. Every word of God is pure, and it is a shield unto them who hold their trust in God. A state exercising a right in accordance with paragraph 1 shall comply with the conditions for its exercise provided for in the treaty or established in conformity with the treaty. So again, I knew thee before I formed thee in the belly is establishing that their ordinances can't sanction me. That's what's being exercised. As amended hereafter, this state preserves the right of freedom of transit for all non-commercial actions in conformity with such law as established. And I'm not going to do it now, but again, as I go through and review this, I'm going to put Psalms 121, verse 8. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. And that shows where the conformity comes in. Again, something superior to what they've written. And then I wrote or put in the link here. And you guys, for now, you'll have to copy and paste the links. I haven't gone through and done the actual link posting, so you can just click on the link yet for a lot of these. But the Vienna Convention of 1963, which is the establishing, and then Vienna Convention 1980, after the establishment, they went through some changes. Constitution of the Universal Postal Union. Again, this constitution is established by adoption in, on, and for the public domain and known as the World Wide Web, as amended hereby with classification of private use only and not commercial. You just reiterate it for every adoption. And it's got all the information we've been going over. Plus, I put some information on Interpol on the draft memorandum on understanding between the International Criminal Police Organization and the Universal Postal Union. Now, this is a memorandum that goes directly towards human trafficking and trafficking of persons, whether it be by intent, mutual mistake, or whatever. It's a matter of point of correcting the record. Again, we're not trying to accuse anybody of human trafficking or trafficking in persons. We're just showing that seems to be what's happened, and we just want to come to peace and correct the records so it doesn't happen again. Full forgiveness on both sides. And when we forgive them and hand that title back, that's a pecuniary forgiveness that now puts money in their hands that they're obligated to use for both their interests, United States interests, National Forest Service, and Forest Service in regards to forest legacy. In case you hadn't seen my recent post on that, and I'll be putting that information in here as well. So it would be prudent to keep up with this page from now on. If you're involved in these reconciling master trust account, I haven't placed that on here yet, but as soon as I do, that will be an establishing point for setting up my reversions and everything. So be watching. Library of Congress, again, eligibility is the first and primary factor. I've got to put my adoption here statement in, but it talks about the mission of Hath Trust is to contribute to research, scholarship, and the common good by collaboratively collecting, organizing, preserving, communicating, and sharing the record of human knowledge. And that's what I am doing here. That's all I'm doing is sharing human knowledge. Again, I urge people, quit filing the suits, quit filing their documents in the paper definitive form in their courts. Establish yourself electronically in a peaceful manner. With that, I yield the floor. I invite all kinds of questions, complaints, comments, concerns, compliments, everything, people. I'm ready to move, and I hope you can stay up with me. I'm serious. Somebody put a question in there. Can you forward your mail to your Yahoo? That's what I gave all my mail to. I do have other mail addresses, but that one should go. I guess I don't understand your question, but other than that, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to ask if you could touch on just discerning regarding the call on Saturday. I was just kind of like a little confused as to whether or not, I guess, just the agency acting as in fiduciary duty or the capacity, and just that whole thing is still kind of confusing to me.
Okay, when they're operating in a fiduciary capacity like that, they're getting a compensation. It's called a pecuniary compensation, and when they're doing that, they're actually operating as a trustee in the public trust, and they have certain rights, duties, and obligations. What they're doing is they're taking advantage of people that don't know. The object is that when they hand you that offer and acceptance in formation of contract, all you have to do is qualify the contract. Qualification of the contract is for full acquittance and discharge as a receipt. Somebody has caused a receipt to be given to the spoliated owner who can use it for indemnification. And this is that 50 USC 4305 part D or part B2, where it talks about the conveyance of anything in paper form can be returned and given a directive for full acquittance and discharge if it's done in the interest of the United States.
Could you say that one more time? I was just going to try to write it down.
Tell you what, why don't we just set up a private Zoom after we get done here?
Okay.
If you're available, and I can just, are you on Facebook or?
It's a Zoom recording. I guess it's the app, maybe.
Okay, well, you got the Zoom hook link through Facebook?
No, Lawful Living.
Lawful Living. Okay.
Yeah.
You got my email address and you got my email address in the chat.
Okay. Okay.
Email me when we get done here, and we'll hook up, and I'll open a link and send it to you through email, and we'll talk about that further. But the basics of it is we're going to give them a simple statement of assignment, knowing that we're the beneficiary. As a spoliated owner, the beneficiary is deemed to be the true owner, and as a spoliated owner, we can now step in and settle the account as grantor or grantee absolute, because we are in fact known as the owner, and that means we are a grantee of some sort. Grantee absolute, being able to settle the account, we now make a directive to do so for full acquittance and discharge. But what we have to do is make it a specific kind of assignment. I'm going to see if I can find that statement in my comments here and pull it up. But right here, I've got it. I'm going to post this in the comment section, and this will help comprehend what I'm talking about.
That's the only thing I can see in the chat right now is what you just posted.
Okay, let me repost everything. Okay, there's a basic comment for full acquittance and discharge that should work on pretty much anything, as long as you know who you're directing it to. You're going to send it back to the people sending it to you, and you're going to give them the assignment in the interest of the United States to reconvey the debt obligation back to the United States so it can be recorded as full acquittance and discharge. It's not your duty to do that. It's the United States. They have an interest in it because they're seeking pecuniary damage or pecuniary compensation, either way, through fines, fees, penalties, or through salary of fulfilling that trust position. So either way, they're using a United States instrumentality known as an obligation or other security of the United States to enforce their statutory contracts. That's all it is. So we're going to let them go ahead and get paid, but it's going to come out of a different fund, and we're going to have full acquittance and discharge. We're not associated with it. Boom, done deal. And once we do this enough, pretty soon these people will recognize this and say fuck it and just quit sending us the utility bill and stuff. And there's my Yahoo email again.
Okay.
So, Keith, I have a question regarding the usufruct.
Sure.
Because, with the whole Boris and the Lex thing is that I have there isn't any accountability at the private estate that's being conveyed back into private.
Because there is no private estate yet.
Well, there's a private estate before there's a trust. So
Well,
there, as
there's the sense of a private estate, but if it's not established and actually conveyed in the proper manner, in other words, my people shall perish for are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
right.
And when we
And
lose that definitive paper form, then it's no longer a private estate.
so that's the part where, in accordance with the usufruct, is that prior to the trusts being set up in the trust management company, right, that their interest is in this, the non-consideration, the debt securities, as opposed to the actual real property of this estate. And
Correct.
that's an aspect that in other old, here, when I was listening to old work by Boris, that he talks more about, but he hasn't drawn the two together recently, which I
Well,
know you.
it's the timber rights. This is why I talk about I posted on the forest legacy thing. And I've
Mhm.
also mentioned that when we make our transfer of title to the Postal Service, we're looking for a landing certificate to have a military survey done on the land to make sure the soil is comparable to replenish. And this is the whole concept of preserving the forest lands. It's the timber rights. Remember that clip that Derek showed one time about the timber rights? He wasn't interested in the land. He wanted the timber rights. That's the most important thing, is the timber rights.
Or the mineral rights
Yes,
too.
right. The timber and mining rights.
Mining rights, yeah, in particular. But
Yeah, mining as
oftentimes,
in minor,
yeah,
debtor,
right.
creditor. Yes, it's a
It's
minor. They are, the minor account is actually a minor account that's mining your sustenance. It's the
right.
minor,
Yes.
minor. It's mining.
Uh-huh. Well, and what's interesting is that
Got
a
very
lot
short
of
time.
those, all of those are like past